Michelle Christine, daughter, sister, mother, friend, community volunteer, Black female health professional, here to share information with my community to help empower us to live and be our best selves. Let's decide together how to live a life filled with making healthy choices for our mind, body, and spirit. We can and we will change our own health outcomes. Here we go. Let's get into Black Facts. Welcome to Black Facts. I'm your host, Michelle Christine, and this week we'll be talking about self-care with our special guest, Dr. Portia Jackson Preston. Dr. Portia Jackson Preston, DRPH, MPH. Dr. Preston is an assistant professor at California State University, Fullerton, Department of Public Health. She studies individual and organizational approaches to promote well-being with a focus on inclusion and advancing health equity. Let's welcome Dr. Preston. Today, I'd like to welcome our first guest on Black Facts, Dr. Portia A. Jackson Preston. I'm so excited to have you here. I have a lot that I want to discuss with you as it relates to self-care, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to fit everything in, but we're going to do our best. If we can't, I'm having you back for part two.
Great.
So I wanted to invite you on to share about the importance of self-care. It seems the biggest impediment to our own self-care is us not feeling worthy. I know myself personally, I need to do better. Oftentimes, we're told by family and society that, if we're taking care of ourselves, we're somehow being selfish. And I'd like for you to kind of help us unpack that. Let's talk about how we can do better about taking better care of ourselves so we can take care of our loved ones. So my first question is, what is self-care?
So first of all, it's such an honor to be here on your show. Thank you for having me as a guest. And I just want to say that self-care is anything that you do individually to promote or protect your well-being. So it could mean multiple aspects. It could be the relationships in your life, nurturing those relationships, taking care of your emotional health, psychological, physical, professional self-care, your spiritual health. So it's really up to the individual to define what is at the core of their well-being, but really it's an intentional and mindful practice of caring for oneself.
Okay. So I know I personally try to go on long walks and I dance when I'm, like really kind of crazy and feeling, like my shoulders are like up here. Mm-hmm. I just go in my room and just put on some music, Beyonce, and, just let it go, right? So that I can calm down. But in the midst of all of this racial injustice and COVID, this atmosphere that, this environment that we find ourselves in, why is self-care so important, particularly to the Black community?
I was talking to some Black women recently, and what occurred to me is that many of us don't even know how stressed we are when we are walking into a world that does not affirm our dignity and our humanity as a default on a daily basis. We are either having to affirm ourselves or create a barrier to protect ourselves, and sometimes both. That takes energy.
Yes.
The vigilance and awareness that we always have of the person I'm interacting with may not value my life. How do I need to operate? How do I protect my child? That is stress. And holding that stress, it accumulates and it can really hurt us. And so I think of self-care as a practice that we can take in our daily lives to help us really release some of that tension and more effectively manage our stress. We have a lot of default ways that we cope with stress that are acceptable in our community, such as comfort eating. And I'm not coming after soul food. I still love my mother's macaroni and cheese, but when that is my daily way of pushing emotions down and dealing with unpleasant circumstances, I know that there's going to be a long-term cost to that. So self-care is really about being proactive and privileging and protecting yourself and dignifying yourself, saying that you have worth in this world and you have something worthy of protecting.
Well, you just hit on something. you said you weren't going to go there. You weren't going to talk about our soul food, but that's kind of, I feel like, a communal way that we indulge in self-care. And it's probably not necessarily the best way, but let's talk about that a little bit more. So, how do I know in the moment? Because like you said, we're faced with macroaggressions daily. People are not affirming who we are as individuals. We're in positions where we feel like we're always proving ourselves. How do we acknowledge that in the moment and kind of, bring it down?
So there's a few things you said that I want to address. The first thing is, yes, we might think of comfort eating as self-care because it's something that we're doing for ourselves, but I want to define self-care by what are the long-term, short and long-term effects for us. Okay. So it might make me feel really great to go out and buy something that I can't afford, but when I get the bill, it's not going to feel so good anymore. So same thing with these practices that we're doing. Is it really an act of care, or am I trying to cover up something that I don't want to deal with?
Right.
Right. So that's the first thing. Is it really self-care? But I think that, I'm sorry, can you repeat your second question, please?
Well, we were talking about when people aren't affirming us, basically talking about racism, the impact of racism.
Right.
When we're being assaulted daily. Like,
right.
how do we acknowledge that, like, this is what's happening, and still be able to,
So I got excited because what you said brought so much up to mind. So I'm really happy that I asked you so I could be direct with my answer. So what we're dealing with here is there's, something that happens to us. We call that a stimulus. And then we have our response. And what happens for a lot of times when a stressor comes at us, we have an immediate knee-jerk response. We get upset, or we go numb, or we put up a protective barrier. And what we like to teach in stress management and self-care is, how do I build a space between that stimulus and that response? So if I'm in a situation where someone is coming at me in a way that I don't feel is healthy for me, can I pause for a beat to even register how I feel?
Right. Yes. Can we take a moment on that? Because oftentimes, I know for myself, I'm the one who goes into, I'm just going to act like you didn't say that. Right. Because at that moment in time, I know that I can't fully deal with my emotions. So I'll just, okay, right. let's keep it moving, and I'll pack it. Right.
And we never get to that step.
Right.
Because sometimes we're in a situation where we almost come in expecting things to go left. Right. And so the idea that we would take the luxury of a moment to catch ourselves, I'm sure a lot of people are ready to tune out at the prospect of that. We don't always have the luxury of taking a beat, but we have to make sure that we create some time to come check on ourselves. And what I'll often do, because I'm an empath, so that means, I carry the emotions of the people that I interact with. I feel them very strongly. And in this work, I'm constantly interacting with people that are dealing with a lot of different things. And I can't always in the moment do what I would like to care for myself. But I try to take a moment afterwards and say, okay, let me sit with my emotions. And there's something that Dr. Judith Orloff talks about: what emotions belong to me and what emotions belong to someone else. So what would it mean? I had a situation where, I was in public in a very nice neighborhood, and I experienced the racial slur that you're probably thinking of. And in that moment, it felt terrible. And it's never gone away since. But what I've tried to do for myself is to understand that that person was coming out of their conditioning, and it really had nothing to do with me. And that doesn't take it away, but it helps with the healing of it.
Now, is that like after? Because
for sure. In the moment, I didn't know if I was more upset at the person who did it, or all of the people standing around who likely consider themselves allies who said absolutely nothing.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So, in the moment, no, I don't think the expectation is that we're going to always just respond to things with, it's not fine, right? We started out the conversation acknowledging that this is about human dignity and the fact that we aren't given that as a default. And so the question we're wrestling with is, this is not fair. This isn't just, this happens. How can we care for ourselves? And so sometimes that means talking about it, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it means taking some quiet time to yourself and allowing yourself to feel. I will never tell myself that I should not have felt something in that moment.
But I need you to say that again, because I think that we don't give ourselves that space You know, we're just so used to it, the assaults, that, oh, it's just another one, right? And we don't really allow ourselves to say no, but you know, that
Let's think
wasn't.
about that from a historical perspective. That was survival.
Yes, absolutely.
Survival was, if you pause for a moment, this might be the end of you. And
Right.
if you're dealing with this stuff every day, you know, I was in a situation about a year or two ago, and I was the only Black person there. And a lot of people were activated because they said, oh, this happened. And it was really, I guess they pulled it out as a racial aggression. And I looked at them and I said, you know, if that got to me, I wouldn't make it to breakfast in the morning. So there's a certain level that we've had to do to function every day. It doesn't make it okay, but it's just, I can't fight every battle and get anything done. But there's a difference between I'm not going to melt down over everything and I'm going to pretend that I don't feel anything.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So how can we, or what would you recommend that we can do to empower ourselves to push through the negative effects? Like, you know, acknowledge it, but push through and tell ourselves it's okay. It's okay who we are, and it's okay that we continue to move forward and take care of ourselves.
That's a great question. I think at the individual level, many people that I come across in my work, I ask them, do you affirm yourself? And very rarely do people say, yes, I take time to tell myself that I'm worthy. And it sounds crazy to us to do that. And that's because we are in a society that has built consumer demand around the idea that we are never enough. So how dare you have the audacity to say that you are enough? And so we're on this treadmill. We're on this treadmill where we're always hustling for worthiness, as Brene Brown would say. And so I think it starts with just acknowledging that the way that you contextualize self-care and whether or not you deem yourself worthy of it is a reflection not just of the society that you live in, but your own cultural upbringing, your roots, the family that you came from, what you were told you had to do to survive. And for many people listening, we don't want to just survive anymore. We want to thrive.
Yes, yes, please.
And so, in order to do that, we have to start giving ourselves the worthiness that we've been waiting for others to. If you walk into a room with your head held high because you're not waiting for their approval, you're going to wear your crown a little differently.
Yes, yes.
And so,
yes, yes.
With that awareness, you start to say, you know what, I'm worthy of caring for myself. I may not have it in that moment. In that moment, it might have really gotten under my armor, but later I can sit and ask myself, what are you feeling? What do you need? And I don't have to stuff it down with, you know, the pint of ice cream is wonderful. I really feel like it's there for me. And then
in the moment.
Right. I feel betrayed when it's empty. Like, where did you go, friend? So I needed something. And so I think the answer really for me has been building up practices that I can use to take care of myself. And this wasn't easy. Initially, I had, and this is just a few months ago, because the pandemic threw us all for a loop, even those of us who talk about this for a living. I had a reminder on my phone every day at 4:30 to think about a hobby. And I promise you, for the first few weeks, I couldn't think of anything because I was so in this mode of, no, I just want to do the work.
Yes.
And I needed something other than the work. And so I partnered with a wonderful gardener based in Long Beach, Organic Gardens, and they really helped me start my own garden. And having that practice of watching something grow really helps me. And I'm trying to think, what else do I do? Now I know it's good for me to take a bubble bath. May not feel like the effort to get it started, but every time I step in there, I feel the stress melt away. And I've started to really either do guided or silent meditations, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes a day. And the point is not that people listening have to do the same things, but if you keep building up these practices, when you have a stressful moment, you're going to have something to fall back on. But if you aren't practicing these things in that moment, you only have two options: reacting or stuffing it down.
Yes, yes. And I think too many of us are on both polar opposite spectrums. You know, we either react or we shove it down. And we tell ourselves, well, it's okay because, you know, that's who I am, right? That's who I am. So you said a lot. And basically what I heard you say is that self-care is about self-acceptance. It's about saying that I'm worthy. I'm worthy to be cared for. And I love that you're gardening. My mom used to always say, yes, I have to be out there in the dirt. I need to get my hands dirty. That was a way of meditating, and it was very cathartic for her. And I was like, well, that's not my thing, Mom, but I
And that's how I was too. But what happened, so this Black-owned business, Organic Harvest Gardens, had a post one day, and it was a black hand, and it was I think maybe a yam and some dirt. And they said many of us have lost this connection with the earth because we associate it with the forced labor of slavery. And so if you think about the generation since, we have tried to move away from working with the land because we wanted to have access to other options. And I said, wow, I thought about when I was growing up, my cousin and I were reminiscing recently. My family comes from Louisiana. And even when they moved to California, my grandfather would drop off peas at my grandmother's house, and we would shell them in the summer for days. And I just thought that was their way of, we're not somewhere where we are picking from the ground, but you're going to be connected to this process.
Yes.
And so that made me think I need to go build my own relationship with the food that I eat, because I'm always putting things in my body, but I'm not connected to the process.
Oh, yes.
So that's how it became my thing. I needed to watch something grow. And even today, I have a maturing garden now. And I just spent maybe 5 minutes in it today, just admiring the vibrant hues of green, appreciating the pea pods that are forming. And I think that, like you, for so long, I said, not my thing. I have a black thumb. I can't grow anything. And I think it's a matter of us becoming balanced.
Okay. Well, you're inspiring me. Maybe I'll try to see if I can keep a plant alive. I'll start there, baby steps. You also talked about, engaging in like a nice bath, a nice bubble bath.
Yes.
That sounds beautiful to me, and I've tried that, but in the hustle and bustle, how do you calm yourself down?
Right.
Like this is real talk. Like, how do you, that all sounds nice, but how do
you're
you
right.
calm yourself down to say, I have enough time to do this, right? We make time for everything else,
right?
For stuff like that, it's like, oh, it's too long. I don't have 10 minutes for the water to run, to put the stuff in.
No, you are so right. And I think of this as sort of a pyramid. So you think of all the steps you could do on your self-care pyramid, and maybe the base is something that you do when you have 30 seconds. And there were days last week where I literally got a moment to go to the restroom, and I just breathed for a moment. And I always tell people in my work, somehow we have not given up on eating or going to the restroom. I keep hearing people say how busy they are to do things, but we generally make time for those. So if that's the time you have, you can do breathing. Would you mind if I showed you something really quickly?
No, sure.
Okay. So one technique that we could all do is box breathing. And that's breathing in for 4 seconds, holding that breath for 4 seconds, letting it out for 4 seconds, and holding that for 4 seconds.
Okay.
So you want to try?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, out 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4. And there's a rhythm there. And you can work your way up. You don't have to start with that, but the idea is you're just bringing yourself back to being present in the moment. We are always trapped. We're either thinking about the past and ruminating, or we're worrying about the future. And paying attention to your breath just brings you back to the present moment. And you can do that when someone, you just come out of an angry email or an interaction that didn't go well with the coworker, and you just take a moment to have a few deep breaths. That can help set you right. So that can be your, if I have time for nothing else, I'm going to breathe.
Okay, I have time to breathe.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad to hear that's a part of your practice. And so we work up the pyramid from there. I'm not going to take a bath every day, but I think I might be willing to do that once a week. And I have a certain evening in mind. And when that happens, I was listening to Alicia Keys' audiobook. So I was enjoying myself.
Yes. Okay.
So you have to build practices that work for you. You talked about turning on your Beyonce. That's one of my favorites. If I'm stressed and just take a few minutes to dance to that song, what's that, 4 or 5 minutes?
Right. Right.
So you start with the basics. I think we all think that we have to do things so big and grandiose and we never get started. My approach is different. I want you to start with something that you love so much that you couldn't possibly see yourself not doing. So
I
like
like
you
that.
said, I breathe. Perfect. Let's start with that. We'll have a deep breath.
I like that. So you already answered a question that I had. Like how do we put self-care into practice? And you just said, start baby steps. So I would
Absolutely. I
encourage
think that,
everyone to start with a baby step. I mean, just like I said, oh, okay, I may not be at the place where I can do the bubble bath yet, but I definitely can stop and breathe,
yeah,
take 4 seconds to just center myself and, like you said, be present.
yeah.
Another funny thing that a girlfriend of mine said, she said that she goes, I meditate every day. And I said, oh, really? And she says, yeah. She goes, I don't hold it when I have to go to the restroom anymore. I actually go. And she said, and that's taking care of myself. And she said, and while I'm in there, I meditate.
See, I'm telling you.
So
I think,
we were laughing about it, but
yeah,
I thought, wow, that's true. Even just taking the time
yeah,
to go to the restroom and
yeah,
not hold it,
right,
is
right.
being present, and then, spending some quiet time while you're in there to calm yourself. So
And if you're not getting enough of those breaks, drink more water. That will help you and it will send you to the restroom. But even if someone is listening to this and they're driving right now, let's say you're commuting,
mhm.
another thing I'd like to show you very quickly,
Sure.
progressive muscle relaxation.
Okay.
So all you're going to do is right where you are, I just want you to tense up. And if you're driving, don't tense up the bottom half, maybe just your shoulders, okay? But tense, 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 maybe for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and now release. Do you feel a little relaxation
Oh
in your
yeah.
muscles?
Yeah.
You feel the blood flowing?
Yes.
And you can do that. If you're in a meeting and something is really stressing you out, you can just kind of sit there and tense and release, and nobody will know what you're doing. But we want to help start giving our body ways to relieve the stress that we are often carrying around.
Okay. I feel better already. I've taken some breaths. I have released my shoulders.
Good.
Anything else, you'd like to share with us about how we can really just start today
Sure.
with a
So
self-care practice?
the foundation for everything that I do is self-compassion.
Hmm.
Self-compassion was developed by Kristen Neff, and there's 3 principles. Mindful awareness, which we already talked about, being aware of what is happening in the present moment, being aware of yourself. The second is common humanity. Whatever I'm going through right now, I'm not the only person in the world that has experienced this, no matter how bad it is. So if you had a mistake or you had a failure, we tend to go after ourselves, right? What I'm experiencing is common. Other people have experienced this. I am not alone. And then the last step is kindness.
Hmm.
How can I show kindness to myself? Is it kind to tell myself you will never have time on this earth for self care? That is not a luxury of people of color.
No,
That's not
it's not.
fair.
It's not. Yeah.
I told my friends the other day, I think the way that I want to honor Black History Month is by not overworking myself.
Oh, yes. Okay. Let's stop. No, seriously, because that's another thing. You are just hitting on everything today. So, Black History Month, right? So, if you're in a space where you're one of only like
Mhm.
one, what do
Mhm.
we do for Black history? Can you
You
speak for us? Can you
you be the excellence.
this? Can you do? So, I love what you said. Say that again. To honor Black History Month.
By not overworking yourself.
Yes.
Because we have 2 modes. Either we are working twice as hard to prove that we're half as good, or we are lazy. Those are the 2 narratives that we're given. And so if you're slowing down, you must be lazy. What's wrong with you?
Right.
And I struggle myself. There's so many things that I want to get done right now. And my body's doing this beautiful thing. There's a certain time in the afternoon, and it just tells me, nope, no more. And I'm like, wow. Because for a long time, I felt very much like a machine, and I took pride in that. I can get this done. I can push myself. And I'm almost rejoicing that my body's at this point where they're like, no, you work out too hard. We're not going to do
Right,
this.
right.
And so I
Okay.
really have no choice at a certain point just to kind of sit and let the day be. And so I keep telling people, you have to determine what your priorities are. And you imagine that everything that you're holding in your life are balls. And your goal is to find out which ones are made of glass and which ones are made of rubber.
Mm,
If I drop it, will it bounce back?
I like
If there are certain things that won't bounce back, you prioritize those. I want you to, fulfill the requirements of your job. So I'm not saying to deprioritize things that are integral to your life, but we have to start doing a better job of, as leaders, of modeling sustainable performance. And
Mm,
that means that if I hand you 15 priorities, they can't all be done. We need to figure out a plan that allows you to sleep at night, that allows you to delegate and ask questions early and get clarification. We have such poor work habits that
yeah,
people feel like they have to suffer alone to figure everything out.
yeah.
And during the pandemic, that's just a recipe for disaster. So to bring it back to the culture, I'm very blessed that I grew up, in South Central as a member of Young Black Scholars in high school, doing the Black History Super Quiz every year. I can tell you at the drop of a hat that this started off as Black History Week in
Yeah.
1926 with Carter G. Woodson, right? I know my history. And so this is a month that I get to celebrate what I know.
Mm,
And I have these beautiful books that I've been purchasing on Black history and Black culture. And my plan this month is just to sit and read those books. And I'm going to enjoy the rise of Amanda Gorman. You know,
yes, yes,
I'm not putting myself on a steady diet of Black trauma.
yes.
And so I am standing and affirming all experiences, and what other people want for them is that's great, do you. But for me, I've been doing a lot of intensive reading recently about slavery. And this month, I just want to sit
Right,
back and I want to enjoy
right.
all the beautiful things. So I'll be listening to Chloe and Haley. I'll be listening to
Yes, yes,
Umi. I'll be listening to Alicia Keys,
yes,
people who really help me connect with everything that is beautiful. And that Black joy is self care.
yes. I love that. Okay, Black joy, self-care.
Well, I can't give myself credit for that. There was an article in Voices of OC earlier this week that talked about Black joy, and I spent an entire morning testing it to people saying, hey, this is our inheritance. It's not just the trauma, but I'm so grateful for the work that people are doing to elevate that we get to be happy. We
And
don't
we
have to
are
wait
happy. We're
until
happy people, we are happy people by nature.
you wouldn't know it sometimes
True.
because we feel like we have to choose between being woke and being well.
Mm.
And we think we have to do the work until we grind ourselves out.
You just you just keep dropping the gems, being woke and being well. We have to choose. People, we don't have to choose. Portia just told us we do not have to choose between being woke and being well.
And in order to do that, you have to release people's judgments of you. I am confident that there are going to be people that are going to say you're not doing enough.
Oh,
And you have to ask yourself a question, if what am I here for? I believe that if I'm supposed to be here on the other side of the pandemic and I'm supposed to lead, I better care for myself in a way that allows me to. So right now I'm prioritizing my well-being, which means I do things every day for my mental and physical health. And that does tire me out. So I can't work until 10 o'clock at night. And I feel a little bad about that because I was used to producing at a certain
right,
level.
right.
But I know that how I'm showing up for myself allows me to say the things that I'm telling you right now without being a hypocrite. And that matters.
Absolutely. Oh, this has been so wonderful. I'm so happy that you are my first guest, and you've helped me tremendously. I hope, and I know you've helped the viewing audience, but you've definitely helped me to stop, take a breath, realize that I'm worth it, that I don't have to be all things to all people. What's most
Nothing to yourself.
right, exactly, that I take care of myself, and that I tell myself that I'm worth it, that it's important for me to show up for myself, or I can't show up for anyone else, to calm myself and take, a moment to not only breathe, but to let my shoulders down. I've learned some new techniques. Is there anything else that you want to share with our audience, our viewers, about what they can do, and how they can put this into practice. So we're not just talking, but
Right.
we're really, really putting these things into practice.
What I want your listeners to know is that this is an invitation to a journey. This is not something to tick off on your to-do list. I want people to know that what brought me into this work was growing up in South Central and seeing my family succumb to chronic diseases years before they should have.
Yes.
And as I started to ask myself the harder questions, I'm like, Black people aren't just more at risk for these diseases. We're responding to an environment that has operated in a way that has made us unwell.
Yes.
And so what you're trying to uncover with self-care is your key to well-being. And if you're going to be here around on this earth, you have to start making investments in your body that is going to allow you to have good quality of life. And you don't have to earn that. If you don't have a good relationship with yourself, give it time. It didn't feel easy for me to do this. And I shared the mindful self-compassion with you because that practice really changed my life and helped me start to learn to love myself from the inside out and not just everyone around me. So I want them to know it's okay to start with where you are. There's a self-care starter kit that's available free of charge that will allow your listeners to be able to develop a self-care plan. I have developed videos on my YouTube page and I will continue to address these topics. So if people come across something, they have a question, they should feel free to reach out to me. And if I'm available and able to do so, I'll be happy to answer it in videos. But we have to start talking to each other about legitimizing caring for ourselves, especially when the world will not.
Yes. And so we're going to provide that link to the self starter kit and also to your TED Talk. Do you want to tell the viewing audience the title of your TED Talk? That's what got me. I was like, oh, okay.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
So the talk was called The Missing Ingredient in Self-Care. And it really talks about my own journey. When I was in grad school and people told me the stress affected your health, I just didn't believe them. And what you'll find when you listen to this talk, it's 11 minutes, you will find out how it took me going through a life-threatening health conditions that I still can't believe that I survived to get me on the right page to prioritize my own well-being. But gratefully, it positioned me to do this work. So I believe in this work because my own survival depended on it. And I lay out a framework for this idea of self-care as both an individual and community practice, because if we're not coming together and asking for the resources to be put in place, both through organizations and state and federal and local policy, it's impossible for individuals to really access the resources they need to engage in self-care. So I lay out my entire vision in the talk.
Let's talk a little bit about that. You mentioned policy. And being communal. So what can we do actively as a community to advocate for policy change or, on a systematic level? So, we know what we can do now. You shared some tips about individual, but how can we translate that self-care where it's going to help our community as a whole?
We need to be vocal with our policymakers, starting with the city council and going all the way up to the presidency. We know that we can't have people that are well if they don't have access to healthcare. If they live in a resource poor food environment where they don't have affordable groceries that are high in quality, the things that you have been experiencing all your life, start to turn an attentive eye to that and say, we need to be asking for more. And it doesn't happen overnight, but if we don't apply the pressure, nothing will change. So absolutely uniting together. There's several task forces. Healthy African American Families comes to mind. There's a lot of organizations that are doing the work in this community. Show up to their meetings. There's a wonderful Black maternal task force led by Ajoa Jones over in LA County.
And there's
find the people who are doing the work.
Network.
Yes.
Yeah, like you said, there's so many.
There's so many. The California Black Women's Health Project.
Google all of that, right?
Google all of that, because you don't have to start. You don't have to start alone. Right. But we need to be a united web of people advocating for our well-being. So I promise you, if you join this fight, you will find others who are motivated like you, and we can continue to advocate for the green spaces, for the healthy food, for work hours that are sustainable.
Yes,
especially in a pandemic.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. You have, like I said, you've just been such a wonderful resource of information, and you've now, helped me appreciate. I already knew that I needed to do better about taking care of myself. And that's why I wanted to have this as my first show to, talk about self-care. But I really, really hope that it's not just me that's taking the next step. I hope that our viewing audience, that, they too will realize that you're worth it. So
Yes, you
please
are.
take the next step, whatever that is, something small. This
Yes.
evening, decide and commit to yourselves. Make a commitment to yourselves that you are going to do something to start taking better care of yourself. That's the whole point of this show, Black Facts. I want to ensure that we are coming together and we're getting information and hearing and learning, how we can do better about changing the narrative of our health outcomes. I'm so tired of hearing how we're the worst, the statistics are the worst, for Blacks across the spectrum of health issues. I want to change that narrative around, and I know that we can do it together. So I want to use this platform to be able to help inform, educate, bring out resources. And you have been an amazing guest. I'm going to have you back because
I want to come back.
There are some things you said that I'm like, oh, okay, yes, I need to talk to her again.
I have so many people I want to shout out. I forgot to talk about Girl Trek, which is the largest.
Yes. Okay, talk about Girl Trek.
Thank you. So Girl Trek, we just hit 1 million Black women who took a pledge of self-care to commit to walk for half an hour a day. And this is the largest public health movement for Black women. And it's completely free of charge. They have communities in Los Angeles and not only across the nation, but also in several countries in Africa. For free, you can find a group to start walking with, and they're taking the appropriate precautions. So please check out girltrek.org. We will definitely have to talk again because every person I know about, I want to put them on blast. There are so many beautiful Black-owned businesses and organizations that are working for our well-being, and I want to make sure that people know about them.
Absolutely. You know how to get in contact with me, and I plan on, like I said, sharing information with our community. This is the whole reason for this show, is to make sure that we're getting information out and that we are individually and collectively going to be healthier, as a community moving forward. And we will be able to look back and say, I remember a time when, we had this issue, we had that issue. No more. We're gonna change, like I said, change that narrative around, one at a time. So thank you. I so appreciate you. You are my new BFF. Thank you again. And once again, we're gonna have you back.
I look forward to it.
You offline about some other topics that I want you to speak on. But thank you again, Dr. Preston. I really appreciate your time. So that's it. We will see you next time. Make sure you know the facts. Talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Black Facts. We really appreciate it. We also like to thank our inaugural sponsor, IEHP, for funding the launch of our show for February and March. For more information about IEHP, check out our link in the description below. And as always, thank you for your support. Don't forget to take care of yourself and your health, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you here for our next conversation on Black Facts. See you real soon. Make sure to come back so you can know the facts. Bye.
Black Facts, talking about